Good morning. This is Tracy from the Cuyahoga County Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us today for our State of the City online event. It's been a strange and challenging year, and for all those reasons, this is not the easiest thing for people in government to pull together. So we really appreciate the City of Auburn taking the time to prepare this presentation and bring it to us this morning to speak with our community, because all the same reasons that make it hard for them to do so are all the same reasons we want to hear from them. So this morning we have Mayor Quill from the City of Auburn, and we have Jeff Dygert, the city manager, to speak with you about what is happening at the city. You are on YouTube. We are streaming on YouTube. So anyone watching there, if you have questions, you can leave them as a comment. And if there's time at the end, we will circle around to them and ask the questions to Jeff and the mayor. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the mayor to get things started this morning. The mayor has a long history of public service, and we're just really happy to have him here with us today. So take it away, Mayor.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual State of the City. Personally, this is my 13th year, and to keep the record straight, no two have ever been the same, and I don't expect this one will be the same as in past years. So thank you for entertaining us this morning. Starting out with the City Council, we have a new member of City Council, and to the right of the picture is Councilor Tim LaCastro. Tim came to us the first of the year, along with Councilor Debbie McCormick, Terry Cuddy, Jim Genentino, and the handsome guy on the far left is myself. So I enjoy working with each of our members of council. They all bring something a little different to the table, and we're making great progress in the city of Auburn. As all of you are aware, this has been a very tough year for all of us, no matter what your walk of life is, whether it's politics, manufacturing, whatever you do for a living. This COVID has affected all of us and our families. I do want to give a shout out to our City of Auburn employees, each and every one of them. They've worked under some very strenuous conditions, situations, and as always, they have stepped forward and carried the ball, and we're very, very proud of them. And hopefully in the very near future, we can get back to somewhat of a normal life, although most of us really believe that this is going to be our normal life for a while. So I'd like to take a moment and talk about our city manager. I've known Jeff for quite a few years now. He has done a remarkable job. I don't know how he keeps track of what he has to do during the day and keep it all cataloged and available, but he's done a terrific job. The employees are very comfortable with him, and myself and council are very comfortable with him and trust him. I don't believe we could trust him anymore. He's doing what's right for our community, and we look for better and greater things for him to come in the near future. So with that, I'd like to introduce our city manager, Mr. Jeff Dygert.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Tracy, is this all working fine for you right at the moment?
It sure is.
I'm gonna assume that we are. So this is certainly different, doing the State of the City in this manner rather than what we normally do, is typically a luncheon at one of the local hotels, and people get to have lunch, and I have to be careful about getting stuff on my tie before I go to speak. But we normally have a little bit of interaction, which we won't have. So hopefully Tracy can put in some laugh tracks and applause tracks and things like that at the appropriate times, because otherwise it's going to seem a little bland. We have a little bit more time probably today because we don't have folks on their lunch hour trying to get in and get out and back to their normal jobs and life. So I might provide a little more detail here than we typically would. First of all, I wanted to thank all of our city staff and our department heads for the work that they do every day. You know, that would go without saying, no matter what the circumstances. But this year, especially with the COVID situation, all of our staff and our department heads have really had to have been adaptable and willing to work on finding new ways to do business and provide the services that are provided to the community day in and day out. And specifically, Jenny Haynes, our Director of Planning and Economic Development, and Holly Glore, who's here off to the side today. She put together this slideshow presentation and is directing things off to the side. Most of the projects that I'll discuss here this morning are projects that required years of planning, both on the part of our city council through the years and our staff through the years. So, you know, these are things that typically don't just pop up and happen. They're many, many years in the making. It's important, obviously, I think, to talk about COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on the city of Auburn's operations and what we've done and what our role has been. Back in February, it became obvious to the leadership in the city that we would be dealing with the impact of COVID-19. And from the beginning, we've thought that the concerns of COVID-19 fall into a variety of categories, most notably the medical situation, and then the operational impact on our municipal services, and then very, very significant impact is the financial impact or the fallout of the response to COVID-19 and all of those things. So I'll talk about each one of those things a little bit as we go along. Related to the medical aspect of things, the Cuyahoga County Health Department is the local lead agency that deals with all things health related. The city of Auburn does not have its own health department. That's something that went away many, many years ago, and we rely on the county health department to provide us the appropriate guidance in dealing with the health aspects of the current situation. Operationally, back in March, the city closed its facilities to the public and started making operational changes. Those were to comply with New York State directives that informed municipalities to reduce their workforces by 50%. So we did that in a variety of ways. We had city staff, some of which were working from home, some because of their job duties weren't able to work from home. And we worked through things and did that for a couple of months until we were allowed to reopen and get our employees back to work. During that particular time, our police and fire departments modified their response practices and their operations to protect their employees and protect the staff. One of the things we were concerned about with those particular services is because of the amount of public interaction that those agencies have, that there was a significant exposure risk to the police and fire department. And while it may or may not be a direct medical impact on an individual, what happens is if individuals are exposed, they have to go into quarantine, and as well, the other folks that they interact with, their coworkers in some cases, have to go into quarantine. So it was obvious early on the way these situations were playing out across the country. Several police and fire departments were very negatively impacted by large numbers of their staff being in quarantine. So the leadership in both of those departments put operations and procedures in place to protect our workers the best they could. And back at the beginning of this month, at the beginning of July, as the New York State reopening plan rolled out, we were able to reopen our city facilities and start to get back to a little bit of normal operation with appropriate restrictions and precautions in place. So some things that we have done, most notably at City Hall, because that's the place where most of the public comes in and out of, we've restricted access. We asked the public to continue to try to do their business and their interactions with City Hall remotely via phone, email, paying bills online, things like that. But we do understand that from time to time, certain functions they need or require some face-to-face interaction. So we worked with several local vendors. We worked with Colella Millwork to make some modifications to city facilities to provide barriers at points where the public interacts with city staff, and A&M Graphics to create some great signage, which was actually a requirement of New York State as well, on the precautions and things that need to happen in order for us to open the building up, be safe for the public, and be safe for our workforce as well. So some things have changed. We no longer enter and exit the building out of multiple spots. There's one entry location for the public, which is located at the rear of City Hall. When visitors or when people are coming in to do business at City Hall, they're asked a series of questions related to potential exposure to COVID. And we ask all of our visitors to City Hall to be respectful of each other and our employees and wear a mask while they're in the building. Related to the budget, we continue to watch our revenues carefully, and certainly are watching our expenditures carefully as well. The City Council, early on in this, when there was discussions about lots of other municipalities potentially furloughing employees, laying off employees, they did not want to do that. I did not want to do that. Wanted to provide some stability for our workforce and some reassurance that, you know, we will get through this. We'll work together. We'll be fiscally responsible and make sure our local families who are supported by working for the city can do what they need to do. So there's been no workforce reduction related to that. There has been a minor workforce reduction in that every summer we typically hire quite a bit of seasonal help, typically high school and college age young adults to help with things like maintenance of parks and playgrounds and things like that. For the most part, we did not hire those positions this summer. So if you're around the city of Auburn and you notice some things maybe aren't quite up to par as far as maintenance goes at some of those facilities and locations, that's more than likely the result of that workforce reduction of not having the seasonal employees. So please be patient. If there's something that pops out that you think needs or demands attention, communicate with the city and we'll get somebody on it. The other thing that has happened with COVID-19 is we've been doing our best to try to work with local businesses and help them to the extent that we can within the restrictions set forth by New York State. So one of the things that happened again roughly early July was that New York State allowed some bars and restaurants to reopen with certain restrictions. And some of the things that were allowed were expanded outdoor seating areas. And to the extent we could, where we own the space surrounding a particular business, we worked with those businesses. This is typically in the downtown area specifically, to expand further into the public right of way, more onto the sidewalk and things like that. We continued that for approximately a month, and we have discontinued that. We're open to further discussion on it, but what we saw is not a lot of utilization of that space, and that came after discussion with all of those impacted businesses. And again, if things change, if the public desire for going out and socializing with all of these controls in place changes, we'll certainly look at that again. But the other thing that happened is the federal government released some funding to local municipalities in the form of community development block grant funding specific to the COVID emergency or situation. So when we worked through that, we had several $100,000 that were allocated to the city of Auburn. The city council approved the distribution of that funding in a variety of ways to different types of organizations. And city staff worked alongside with CETA staff to evaluate the applications and distribute the funding as quickly as we possibly could. Along the way, city staff as well as CETA staff identified some existing CDBG funding that they were able to reallocate to the tune of an extra $100,000 to help these businesses along even more and to help more businesses. So under the human services category of that grant program, there was a total of approximately $169,000 available, and that funded 20 different applications through human services organizations. And then under the Economic Recovery Support Program, there was a total of $404,000 available. So we were able to provide support for 56 local businesses and 8 not-for-profit arts and cultural organizations with that funding. That funding has been distributed at this point, and we're hoping that that has a positive impact on the ability of those businesses to stay in business, stay current on their bills, and continue a healthy business relationship with all their partners as well. I wanted to make mention, and I hesitate to do this because I don't want to leave anybody out, and if I do, I apologize, but we've had an awful lot of local businesses step up to try to provide services and product to local government, local medical facilities, businesses, things like that, amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And some have done it locally, some have done it on a statewide or nationwide scale. So I wanted to mention a couple of those. Early on, Courier Plastics provided local assistance. Some of the early items that were required for businesses and our first responders, some of the most basic things were masks and hand sanitizer. Unfortunately, the hand sanitizer we were getting tended to come in large quantities, big gallon buckets and things like that, that aren't really handy for keeping on your person or things like that. Courier Plastics helped out. Some of you may know Courier makes small bottles and things like that for the hotel industry and for a variety of other things, but they were able to help us allow our first responders and our essential personnel to pour off some of those large quantities into smaller, more manageable containers. At least for the city, A&M Graphics has been a great partner as we try to provide signage at parks and playgrounds and within our city buildings and things like that to keep the public informed on what's going on. Mac Studios, Bowmar Plastics, both stepped up to create barriers and actually change their production lines to some extent to produce face shields for our medical staff, first responders, and others essential workers in the community as well as outside the community. Colella Millwork has been working with the city to provide plexiglass barriers and some modification to our city hall, as I mentioned before. Our city hall is somewhat unique in that it's a historic building, and while we want to protect our employees and the public, we didn't want to disrupt or damage the historic character of the building to any great extent. So we thank them for their care and diligence in providing the protection we need. And then one of the other big stories was Tessie Plastics, local plastic manufacturer, who had in recent years acquired the McQuay property in Technology Park. For warehousing purposes, made a strategic decision to turn that warehousing property into a manufacturing facility for producing components and test kits for a national need for COVID-19 testing. So Tessie Plastics has been working hard down at Tech Park to get their operation up and running, and I believe this week or next week they may be actually in production of that product. One of the other top stories that was wrapping up just as the COVID situation hit was the sale of the Seymour Mansion on North Street. The sale of the Seymour Mansion on North Street was the result of some ongoing discussion that staff had about what we do with tax delinquent properties and properties that the city acquires for back taxes. In the past, we had taken a very simple and easy approach, quite honestly, that when we acquire properties, we would essentially just auction off those properties to the highest bidder, and it made for quick work, got things taken care of, got it out of the city's hands and into private hands. Unfortunately, at times we have properties that are unique and interesting, maybe historically or culturally significant or structurally significant. And so this year we decided that we had a couple of properties we wanted to pay particular attention to and enlist the services of a professional realtor. So late last year, 2019, the city released a request for proposals for realty services to deal with some of those identified properties. We ended up in a contract with Michael DeRosa Exchange, and through a series of fortunate incidents and exposure and the hard work of Mike DeRosa, one particular property at 113 North Street, the Seymour Mansion, ended up getting international attention, very significant international attention. But in the end, long story short, in the end, the property, we had multiple offers on the property, and we weren't so much concerned with the amount of money we would get on the front side of the sale of the property, but we were more concerned about the end use of the property and what would become of it, and would it be appropriately restored and maintained and become a good part of the neighborhood, a positive aspect in the neighborhood. So ultimately, after much discussion and interviews with multiple proposals or proposers, the decision was made to offer the property to what actually is a local family. So the joint family, who has its roots in Auburn and Owasco, is going to be coming home from the Washington, D.C. area to raise their family, a large family, in the Seymour Mansion and provide the restoration of that building in what will be a single family residence, which is a goal, has been a goal of councils for many years to try to make sure we preserve some of these properties. Other projects we've got going on, last winter, December 12th, we did a ribbon cutting ceremony for the North Division Street Bridge, another project that was many years in the making. The project took care of a significant design flaw in the flow of traffic down there, created better flow, provided a better perspective on the outlet. So if you have time, if you haven't gone down there, there's a nice neat area there where you can actually overlook the falls in that area. It's part of the old factory that was down there. It's a pretty impressive spot. That was a $6.3 million project, 85% of it reimbursed through the New York State Department of Transportation, and the city paid 15% on that particular project. We've got certainly many, continue to have many water and wastewater projects undertaken to ensure the safe and reliable drinking water and the safe processing of wastewater throughout the city. So the slide that you see before you is just one of those projects, and this was just recently wrapped up in the last month or so. And this is a zebra mussel mitigation project. On the left, you see a photo of the water intake that provides water to our water filtration plant from Owasco Lake for distribution throughout the city and the communities that are on the City of Auburn system. And over time, those zebra mussels can tend to clog that pipe up and create problems and structural issues, things like that. So this spring, that project was undertaken to clean that out and reestablish some lines that go through there and will discourage the zebra mussels from getting back in there and causing problems. On the opposite end of our system, on the sewer side of it, we recently powered up a new UV disinfection system for our sewage treatment plant. And from what I'm told, the water quality coming out of the discharge pipe down there is such that you could take yourself a cup of that and drink it. I'm going to take their word for it, but that is a good thing, and another example of our commitment to trying to make sure that what we utilize and what we discharge back into the environment is safe for our friends and neighbors downstream. Some other big projects that have gone on in the city this year. Casey Park Recreational Facility over the last couple of years has seen a significant investment by the city and some of our state partners. And that facility is in excess of 40 years old, actually approaching 50 years old. So over time, we've needed to do a variety of projects to upgrade things. You may recall that last year, the ice rink chiller system was replaced thanks to some funding provided through Senator Helming's office. This year, the pool was relined thanks to some funding, $100,000 through Assemblyman Finch. And some of the projects that have happened down there have taken place as part of capital improvement funding through the city's general fund. So there was some additional pool work done down there. The roof was replaced at Casey Park over the ice rink, which was in significant need of replacement before we ended up with structural damage. And the locker rooms are being replaced. You'll see a picture in the lower right of your screen of some new lockers. And as we embarked on that project, we looked at national vendors for that product and also reached out to a local vendor with no particular expertise in hockey lockers, but with expertise in millwork. And we were fortunate that Colella Millwork, another local company, was able to come in as a low bidder on that project, and we're able to do a significant amount of business with a local manufacturer to provide a product for our city facility. And then again, through community development block grant funding, we were able to resurface and refence, restore, if you will, the basketball, tennis, and pickleball courts at Casey Park. So in total, over the last 2 years or so, we've invested just shy of $1 million into Casey Park, and that should keep it up and running for many years to come. And we've got a note in my presentation here that this is in addition to other things that have happened, like last year's community build of the Casey Park Playground. So after nearly 50 years of service, Casey Park is still looking pretty good down there. Every year when our planning staff does community development block grant community meetings to find out where the public would like to see some of that funding go, one of the common topics is parks and playgrounds, parks and playgrounds. So over the last several years, we've attempted to reinvest and restore many of those playgrounds. This past year, CDBG funding contributed to the restoration of Sherwood Park with basketball courts, fencing, the playground, and benches. And you'll see that is the photo in the upper left. And Clifford Park Playground has seen several upgrades through the years. Last year, we finished up the clubhouse down there, and this year, through funding through the Dormitory Authority of New York State, the playground and the lighting in the adjacent area were updated at Clifford Park. There have been, since the onset of COVID, there have been a lot of discussions, a lot of dialogue, a lot of questions about the downtown revitalization initiative, which was awarded to the city of Auburn last year. So I'd like to clarify that last year, the city of Auburn and a variety of businesses and local institutions were awarded awards to the downtown revitalization initiative. Those projects are still moving forward. In many cases, it may not seem like there's things going on, but there's an awful lot of planning that goes goes into the works before there's actual construction being done on these buildings. So those projects are moving forward. There is no restriction on that funding, although I do believe moving forward, any cities that are trying to get this funding, this program is somewhat stalled out. But for us, the projects continue to move forward. For our community partners, the projects continue to move forward. We are working along with CETA staff and New York State to try to make some changes to the downtown revitalization initiative funding related to the small business fund. Some of you may remember that part of the DRI was an allocation of $600,000 for small businesses, and that is a locally administered fund that would allow local small businesses in the DRI area to do a variety of things to fix up their exterior, purchase things they need to do to enhance their businesses. We are working with New York State to try to front load that money. And what that means is that most of these downtown revitalization initiative funds are distributed to the recipients on a reimbursement basis, which means the project has to be funded. And then once the project wraps up, the recipient goes back and applies for the reimbursement from New York State. We're aware that with everything going on with COVID and the significant hit that most local businesses took on that, it may be difficult for a business to front outlay that cash and then wait for a reimbursement. So we're trying hard to work with New York State to change the way that funding is put out there, to try to front load it. So if there's good documentation and a good track record, we could award those funds on the front end of a project as a grant, right straight up. We've been talking about the potential for a public safety building in the city of Auburn for at least 5 years now. We may be going on 6 at this point. And the discussion about the replacement of a fire station for the city of Auburn is a conversation that goes back at least to the early 90s that I'm aware. That project is still moving forward at this point. There are plans and drawings out there for the construction of this building. As a matter of fact, yesterday the plans, the bid documents were released, and that'll take about 3 to 4 weeks before we start receiving bids back for the construction of that facility. At that time, we'll have to evaluate the cost and see where we stand with that project. But essentially, it's a $10 million project that would relocate the fire station, and we have some significant offsetting revenues for that project. Several years ago, New York State DEC awarded the city $2 million towards the project. The DRI program also gave us $1.2 million towards the project. And we expect to see about $300,000 from the New York State Shared Services Initiative as well. So that's a significant impact on the cost of the project. That's essentially 1/3 of the total cost of the project taken care of by grant funds. And we're still continuing to seek out other funding opportunities to continue to drive the cost of that facility down. The location of that facility at the corner of Seminary and Nelson Street, adjacent to Willard Chapel, has undergone a public comment period. We've considered all of those comments, and we'll be sharing those with the public, and we'll be continuing to talk about this project as it progresses. Again, the concept here is to relocate the fire department out of an aging structure that can no longer bear the weight of modern fire apparatus, nor the size. Once that building is vacated by the fire department, it would provide us an opportunity to allow the police department to expand and renovate and do the things they need to do to keep up with their modern law enforcement operation. Another project that's in the works and has been talked about for many, many years, especially in the local neighborhood, is the Bradford Park or Bradford Street Park. Again, this is another CDBG program opportunity, and that will become at a cost to the CDBG program, which is federal funds, approximately $200,000. So that's a, there's plans for that in place, and that project is moving ahead. It seems like the last few years we can't get away from bridge work, but in order to get from point A to point B in the city of Auburn, we need several bridges to accomplish that. And quite a few of them are old and in disrepair. So our most recent project is the State Street Bridge near the Auburn Correctional Facilities in Curley's. That bridge has been removed now. That was the first part of the project. So late last week, the last portions of the bridge were removed. And what's on your screen right now is a rendering of what the bridge will look like when it's completed. So again, similar to North Division Street, it will look better. It will clean up a few areas, provide for some scenic overviews of the outlet and things like that. You'll notice in that photo near the top is what's left of Garden Street, right? So Garden Street goes from State Street into Health Central, the backside of Health Central. And there's some vacant property at the corner, which will be remediated. It was the site of an old gas station for many years. And there's some soil remediation that will happen there. The retaining walls will be reconstructed to prevent erosion in that area, which is important for the stability of the bridge and the railroad bridge, which is at the far left of your photo there, and establish a small pocket park in that area. And that's another project that's 82% funded through a New York State Department of Transportation Bridge New York program. The Auburn Doubledays, the minor league short season team that is essentially owned and operated by the city of Auburn, has certainly been the victim of several unfortunate things this season. And first of which was the 2020 season and the cancellation of minor league play in the New York Penn League due to COVID. So there'll be no season this year. The 2020 season is certainly in question at this point as negotiations continue between Major League and Minor League Baseball. So we really don't know much more about exactly what's going to happen with the future of professional level minor league baseball in the city of Auburn, but we continue to work with the New York Penn League and Minor League Baseball to do everything we can to secure its baseball's professional baseball's position in the city of Auburn. We continue to work with Cayuga Community College on the agreement that we had with the college to share the use of Falcon Park. That's, as many of you will remember, was a hot topic and a big project that occurred last year, a big upgrade to many aspects of the facility at Falcon Park to allow the college to utilize the facility for baseball and other sports in the off season from professional baseball. That agreement is still in place and will be for many years. Unfortunately, the college is in a similar situation where they're not allowed to have college sanctioned sports practicing or competing right at the moment. So we will get back to some sort of normal in the future. We are currently, city staff is currently working with the county, again, on the New York State Shared Services Initiative. That joint project between the county and the college and the city of Auburn for that facility was part of last year's Shared Services Initiative application. And this year we are expecting potentially a significant payment from New York State for the amount of money that that particular project saved Cayuga Community College and in allowing it to expand its sports programs. We've got a couple other things as we look forward into what's happening in the not so distant future. We've got a solar project that's been many years in the making, and that will be more than likely taking place in the very near future on a closed cell at the Auburn Landfill on North Division Street. It's a 5 megawatt project, and will be a relatively simple thing for the city of Auburn. So essentially what we are doing is we are leasing the space to a solar developer, which will produce electricity and push it back into the grid. The 5 megawatt facility has a capacity to power approximately 800 households, and local residents will have an ability to sign in or sign on to a program that will end up saving them approximately 5% on their utility bills once that project's up and running. We tried to do this as a very clean approach to an agreement with a power company. Again, the city is simply leasing the space to the developer, and we have no exposure to market fluctuations and no responsibility for maintenance of the facility. So we've protected the city and the residents, taxpayers, from any of those unknowns, especially as we look far into the future. We've protected the city from that and allowed our residents going forward the ability to sign on for a reduced energy cost for their homes and small businesses. At that same facility, at the landfill, we've been talking for years about the imminent closure of the landfill. That will happen later this year. And over the years, we've talked about the implementation of a transfer station model at the landfill site. So over the years, many options for expansion and even privatization have been explored. Expansion proved to be too costly for a self-sustaining business model, which the landfill is. Expansion was also complicated by the location of multiple things. The Owasco River, utility rights of way in the area, and municipal boundaries all complicate the issue of expansion, let alone the extreme cost of it. There are also increasing environmental regulations which equal increased cost in the very foreseeable future. Even facilities of our size are going to have to increase monitoring of things like air quality, groundwater quality, things like that, with increasingly stringent requirements, and that all drives cost. We discussed privatization of the landfill with a couple local or regional interested parties. And after careful consideration of the business model, they were no longer interested in it either. So we took the opportunity to move ahead to a transfer station model. And what that will do is it will make it so that really our residents, their on-street curbside pickup of their trash, there'll be no change in that. And the ability of an individual to have a permit to go down and dispose of their trash on a particular day themselves, bring a couple bags of trash down to the landfill. That'll all still remain the same. It'll just be a slightly different look to the operation. But for our residential customers, no change. Where the change will be is that there'll no longer be commercial haulers allowed to bring trash into the landfill or to the transfer station. And the reason for that is that our transfer station model, as it exists now, there's a maximum amount of trash that can be accepted by our DEC permit. And if we exceed that, we get into a different classification, which would require significant more investment and cost to the city to support that type of an operation. So in order to keep things small and economically viable, our city residents will will maintain services as they normally have, but there'll be no more commercial service at the landfill. And circling back around to the beginning conversation about the economic impact of COVID-19, we have a few things that we're keeping an eye on. Every year, the city in June receives funding from New York State through what's referred to as AIM funding. This year, so far, New York State has withheld for 12 New York cities, has withheld 20% of that typical AIM funding. To the city of Auburn, that's an impact of approximately $1 million. We do not know the answer yet. We do not know if that funding will come at a later date in full, or if it will come at a later date at a reduced amount, or if it won't come at all. So we're certainly keeping an eye on that and hoping that funding can get restored. Excuse me. But what we have been keeping an eye on certainly is sales tax revenue. And we certainly have seen a reduction in sales tax revenue. You can see by the graph on the screen, over the last couple of years, we've seen significant increases in sales tax revenue. We were on a great trajectory to do wonderful things once again this year. But since COVID-19 hit in March, our sales tax revenues have declined. With that said, due to a very strong initial 9 months, previous 9 months to March, and our conservative budgeting last year, our sales tax revenues are still going to exceed our budgeted figures for the last fiscal year. And our sales tax is still going to be approximately $300,000 more than it was last year. So yes, we've taken a hit in sales tax. Our businesses have taken a hit. We understand that. We have not taken a hit nearly as much as maybe some other cities across New York State have had. And again, that's due in large part to conservative budgeting as we always look forward, try not to overestimate what we'll get in sales tax. And businesses were just doing fantastic prior to the COVID situation. Going into next year, as the months go on, we'll be able to paint a more accurate picture of what the true total impact is going to be. Certainly, we're going to see an impact based on the loss of revenues for our bars and restaurants and things like that, and anything related to tourism in this coming years. So moral of the story there is, please, if you're a city resident and you want to support the city and local businesses, please shop and dine locally, support local businesses, which in turn helps out maintaining city operations. In closing, as the mayor mentioned in his opening remarks, it's been a trying time for everybody in the community, our business owners, the general public, our city staff. Every day there's a continued change in whether it be new guidance from New York State or what we can do in a business and what we can't do in a business. So the bottom line is that I think patience is key. Please be patient with one another. Be patient with business owners and those people that are working in those businesses as they try to navigate new rules and regulations and try to avoid violations that could result in their closure and an end to their business. So please, be considerate of the employees, and the same holds true for our visitors to City Hall. Our folks are just doing what's asked of them. Try to remain positive, shop local. In closing, I'd like to make sure that I thank the Chamber of Commerce again for the opportunity to give everybody a quick update and the work that they put into this every year. And again, to our city staff for doing everything they do every day to keep our city operations going, and to our staff that has helped put this presentation together today. Thank you.